Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me again this evening. This evening, I thought an interesting topic would be looking at something that comes up quite a lot, and that is the rumination over things. Now, sometimes that could be past events, that could be things we've been through, that could be arguments we've had, that could be things we're worried about in the future. Like we've got a meeting in work to go to, but we're not just thinking about how to prepare for it, what's on the agenda. We're not just thinking about what's going to come out of this meeting. No, we're thinking more about the terrible things that are going to happen. What if they say this? What if they point out this mistake? What if this awful, dreadful thing happens? Sometimes we even find ourselves maybe in someone else's head. It's like we're trying to figure them out. Why do they do this? Why are they like that? Why do they behave the way they do? So, one way or another, our mind gets taken up with a lot of different things. And we go over things again and again. Now, I suppose before I go any further, I would say that worry is a normal thing to feel, it's a normal emotion. However, it can become overwhelming whenever it starts to take over. That's when we start to overanalyze, we start to catastrophize. We assume that whatever it is that's going to happen, whatever it is that's coming up, I'm not enough. I can't do enough. I don't have enough to be able to handle it. Whatever it is, it's going to annihilate me. Things are going to be dreadful. Again, we're worrying over things from the past. What does this person think of me now? What is this person saying to other people about me? Again, what were their motives? What were their agendas, and so on? Our minds are all over the place. But the worry itself, as I say, it is a normal thing to feel. Sometimes it's looking at the difference between what could be a real genuine concern and what is the worst case scenario. What is the worst thing that could possibly happen? Now, this evening I'm going to be looking at some of the reasons why we do this, but as always, I'll be giving a few ideas to look at ways to manage it, the ways to quieten that voice in our head. So even if you think of an argument, it could even just be a disagreement, and you knew that you were right, whatever it was, maybe you were blamed in the wrong for something. You could have had this disagreement, and yet afterwards we're still thinking, damn, I wish I'd said this, damn, I wish I'd said that. Even if you had been in an interaction with like a narcissistic person, you know yourself that reality tends to bounce off that emotional armor they wear. They don't really hear anything you're saying. And we're often thinking of, well, if only I could find the right combination of words. I wish I'd said this. I wish I'd said that. As if that's going to get through to them, even though experience has taught us they're not interested in fact. They're not interested in reality. They'll always find a way to get out of it somehow. So we might be asking or saying things to ourselves like, damn, I wish I'd said this. I wish I'd said that. And even if it was weeks, months, even years afterwards, and we're still thinking of the pain, we're still thinking of everything we went through, and we're going through every interaction we ever had, and we're trying to find, we're rehearsing these arguments. If we ever see them again, this is what we're going to say. And it's like we're telling ourselves that this time I will have the right combination of words. This time it will be like a magic spell. This time it will be hard fact. There's no way they will be able to deny anything. And yet, in reality, our experience has taught us that trying to reason with them is like trying to grab an eel with your elbows. Okay. We just can't do it. But here we are, going over every interaction, worrying about things, replaying. It's like our brain is operating like a courtroom. Okay. So what happens with us is we don't like unfinished business. We don't like to be treated unfairly. We don't like to feel uncertain. We don't like things that are maybe outside of our experience, things that are unpredictable. We fear they might be outside of our control. I think there's part of us as well that, especially if we're worrying about things that maybe haven't happened yet, we're dreading something. It's like we need to know things that we don't know. We need to know what to do whenever we don't know what to do. These things can fuel our anxiety. Um, And if it's something new, a new situation, new people, we might have like a social anxiety or something. We might fear new experiences because we've no real experience, with no frame of reference to fall back on. So we fear something's going to go really, really badly. And one of the common things that fuels these fears is this belief that whatever the problem is, whatever the issue is, it's going to last forever. I'm never going to get over this. This event that I've been invited to, I don't know anyone there. It is normal to feel anxious, but we kind of blow that out of proportion, that because we don't know everyone or we don't know anyone, no one's going to like us. They're going to judge us very, very harshly, and I am never going to get over it. So what happens is when we're ruminating, when we're overanalyzing, it's like this tape begins in our head. It's like a loop, and it just plays on a loop, and it takes up a lot of energy. We're not necessarily, we think we're trying to problem solve, but we're not really. We're trying to find ways to avoid problems that haven't necessarily come up yet, or we could be fearing problems that are going to take place. Maybe we've experienced it sometime in the past. The strange thing is, as I said a moment ago, we don't like things. We don't. We need to know things that we don't know. We need to know what to do whenever we don't know what to do. So what we think we're doing is we think we're problem solving, when in reality, a lot of the time, what we're doing is we are, if you will, we're digging a deeper hole for ourselves. We're going further down these different rabbit holes of the terrible things that could happen. Again, we're going over maybe that argument from last week, last year, a decade ago, whatever it is. We're going over the same things again. We think we are problem solving. We think that we are trying to find a solution. We're trying to find some kind of closure. In reality, it's like back in the old days, back in the analog age, it's like that record that just keeps skipping and just keeps on going around. It just plays the same thing over and over again. It keeps skipping, it keeps replaying, and we're not getting any further. Now, the thing is, if you've been through something really terrible, something really horrible, if you'd been in maybe a long-term relationship or dynamic with someone who was constantly gaslighting you, constantly criticizing you, it's not unusual for us to doubt ourselves. What happens is, in those situations, it's like we were always under a constant state of strain and stress and anxiety and so on. So we were always on high alert. It's like, we were flooded with cortisol, things like that. And every now and again, when something would flare up, the adrenaline would kick in. It's like we're in survival mode. We're trying to explain to maybe someone who has decided not to listen. That, again, pardon me, take a quick drink. We don't like that feeling. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to resolve it somehow. We're trying to find some kind of closure. We're trying to find something that's going to work this time. But it becomes so ingrained. It becomes very unhelpful. As I say, we're not problem solving. We are stuck in that loop. We don't know that our brain is trying to do what it's supposed to do in order to solve the problems. But if you think of it, the way it becomes so heightened, the way we're constantly worrying, that part of our brain, the way it's constantly in this state of strain. If you think of it like your car alarm probably makes the most annoying noise you've ever heard, but it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's letting you know that there's something up with your car. Maybe someone's trying to steal it or something. But imagine that car alarm being so sensitive that the cat walks past and it goes off, or it starts raining and it goes off. The alarm is still doing what it's meant to do. It just needs maybe fine-tuned. It's going off at the slightest thing. So the slightest sense of uncertainty, and we start panicking. Again, go into analysis mode, trying to think of all the worst things that could happen and trying to find ways to resolve those things. Even things from the past, as I mentioned a moment ago, things from the past, it could have been you were in a very difficult work situation. You could have been involved with a group of people. Wasn't a pleasant situation. You could have been in an unhealthy relationship. You might have been bullied. You might have been cheated on. One way or another, you were treated very unfairly. Our brain is seeing this as unfinished business, and we're not getting the closure that we think the brain needs. So going from the analog age, let's go into the digital age. If you think of it like your browser on your computer, it's like this tab remains open, okay? And it's just like you can't shut it down. No matter how many times you try to refresh the page, it still looks the same. Nothing's changing, okay? We just can't close it. And we're always stuck, if you know what I mean. We're looking for some kind of closure, some new piece of information, some new perspective that's going to help us close that tab, that's going to stop that record skipping, that's going to help us, or we think is going to help us to be able to move on. If we were to recognize that maybe there are some people who just, they are what they are, they're not going to listen. There are some situations that even if we presented evidence, fact, whatever it was, they're not going to change their mind. They behaved the way they did, no matter how much we tried to convince them otherwise. There might have been a lot of unsaid words, just like that argument I was telling you about earlier. Afterwards, we're thinking, damn, I wish I'd have said this. Yeah, in some cases that might have done the job, but if it was one of those narcissistic type people who are not going to listen to a damn thing, it doesn't matter what you were going to say. So it's recognizing that there could be some unsaid words, but it's also recognizing there might be unexpressed emotions, unexpressed frustrations. So our brain is thinking there's something just left hanging, something that is left unresolved. And like I say, that part of our brain that recognizes danger, the fight and flight and all that sort of thing, it keeps sounding the alarm. It keeps going off. Sometimes it just comes over as like a wave. Sometimes something will happen and it will remind us. The alarm goes off again. And we're back to where we started because that file, that tab just hasn't been closed. Now, the problem is that in many cases, what we can't do is we just can't resolve it because maybe there is no new piece of information. Also, especially if there's been a lot of emotional entanglement and so on, it's very hard to just move on from it. So again, that alarm just keeps blaring. And the more it does that, the more it's demanding attention. It's demanding a solution or an answer that we can't give it. And after a while, it becomes like a learned habit. It's one where we keep on dwelling on these unresolved issues. And we're trying to process them in a, well, not trying to, but we often process them in an abstract way, and it's often a negative way. And the negativity cements that loop because we don't like things that feel uncomfortable. We don't like things that don't make sense. We don't like things left hanging. We like to have some kind of resolution. So the way we process them is negative, which keeps that loop going. The more we go down these different rabbit holes, the more ingrained the habit becomes. Now, even when it does become habitual, the rumination, the overanalyzing, we think it's being useful. We think it's helping us in some cases. If it's dwelling over something from the past, maybe not so much. We kind of, maybe at some level, we know we're hurting. If we're worrying about something from tomorrow, something from next week or whatever, we think we're preparing for something. We think we're preparing for that worst case scenario. If they do this, then I'm going to say this. And if this happens, then I'll just do whatever. We think we're covering all the bases. I think of it as like we're risk assessing, okay? And even if this is someone from our past and we keep going over those situations for the next time we see them, again, we're preparing for that next encounter, for that next round, if you will. We're trying to get a new bit of insight and we're trying to find the right thing to say that's going to resolve it, that's going to suddenly make them say, damn it, you know what, you were right the whole time. I was definitely out of order there. You know, you were right the whole time. Again, if they wouldn't do that the whole time we were together, even if you presented them with reality, with facts, with honesty, What makes you think it's going to happen this time? Because again, if we're honest with ourselves, we think we're preparing, but we're not really. What we're actually doing is we're feeding that loop. It keeps going round. The more negative it becomes, the more we're trying to get away from it. The more we try to get away from it, the more negative it becomes. Actually, I think if you put it this way, it's like we're rehearsing distress. We're not solving anything. We're more cementing the problem, the issue, the difficulty. The more we replay the arguments, those situations, the more we try to think of those terrible things that are going to happen if this and if that, the more entrenched that habit becomes in our brain. So, I was going to say something. It's just escaped my brain there. Let me see if I can word it. Yeah, it creates this vicious cycle. The bad mood fuels the rumination. The fear fuels the rumination. The uncertainty fuels the rumination. The need for some kind of closure fuels the rumination. And this in turn deepens what's going on with us. So it becomes this self-perpetuating cycle of misery, anxiety, low mood, anger, and all the rest of it. Now, just to be fair, I would say this is normal. A lot of us do experience this in certain situations, especially if something is really uncomfortable, really distressing, something that really doesn't make sense to us. After a while, it maybe starts to come down again. But then there's other times, for instance, if someone has maybe high traits of obsessive compulsive disorder, or maybe they have a history of trauma, what they might have is like a very high, vivid imagination, which isn't a bad thing. Imagination is a good thing to have, but the imagination is more working against them rather than for them. And what they don't have are off switches for those terrible, terrifying thoughts. People with deeply ingrained anxiety or anxiety disorders as well, the rumination can manifest. The way it comes up, it's like they're like mental compulsions. This mental review of things, replaying the conversations endlessly. I suppose what you'd say is trying to find some kind of reassurance, but it's a reassurance that never comes. When it comes to something like trauma, especially someone who's maybe been in a long-term abusive relationship or environment, the rumination, it's often repeated negative thinking. A lot of the time, that negative thinking, that inner critic, those super ego injunctions we have, it's not even our voice. It could be the abusive person's voice. That we're never going to move on, that we're no good without them, that they're better off without us, and all the rest of it. And we will fail at everything. There's part of us knows that's not true, but it's so deeply ingrained. And every time we try something new, every time we try to move on, every time we try to do something, again, the negativity comes in. It's the abuser's voice. It's not ours. But it does cause a lot of rumination, overanalyzing, and those repetitive negative thinking habits, often about the whole of the relationship, not necessarily one event, especially if it was a long-term relationship. It's like one damn thing after another. One thing fuels something else, and so on and on and on it goes. And what we're often left with are things like intrusive memories, intrusive thoughts. Now, the thing is about thoughts, most thoughts are automatic in the sense that they just pop into our heads. For instance, you could be on your way home from work and you think to yourself, yeah, that's right, I need to pick up some coffee. I've run out of coffee. That's an automatic thought. The difficult ones, the painful ones, are the ones we call intrusive. And once they pop into our head, they become uncomfortable. We try to get rid of the thought. That often makes it worse. Again, that part of us that's hardwired for danger thinks we might still be in some kind of danger. And it's, if you will, it's screaming at us, we need to do something. We need to work it out somehow. We need to fix and resolve this somehow. But again, it's like there's no new information coming. And the harder we try to think about it, the harder we try to push it away, the harder we try to avoid it, the harder we try to maybe carry it through to its conclusion, often the worse it gets. So that's just an idea of the rumination, why we ruminate, why we replay arguments in our head, why we replay situations in our head. We're looking for some kind of closure that's not really coming. We don't like the unfinished business, and we don't like things that don't sit well with us. We don't like things that don't make sense. So what do you do about it? Well, as I often say, first thing is maybe some awareness, and it's recognizing that some things are genuine concerns and worries. That meeting in work next week could be an important meeting. You don't know how it's going to go. Are you going to get are you going to be given responsibility for this project, the one that you've been looking forward to, the one you've been working on, or is that going to go to someone else? Where are you going to find the money to pay the bills this month? One huge massive bill, having to fix your car or whatever, that can knock us all a bit out of kilter. There are genuine concerns, genuine worries. And it's trying to discern the difference between a real problem and a worst case scenario. Now, the thing is, only you can really discern this, okay? There are some people, let me put it to you this way. I know some people are well-meaning, but have you ever met anyone who stopped worrying by being told, just don't worry about it? Or anyone who stopped thinking about something by just being told, just don't think about it? That's not helpful, okay? Even if it's said with the best will in the world, I think the only person that can really discern is you. That being said, sometimes things can be a worry. They might not necessarily be a priority. Some things might be a worry. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're not capable of dealing with it. I often think we're often a lot more resilient. We're often a lot more resourceful and confident than we give ourselves credit for. When it's something like long-term stress and anxiety, if you were to score yourself from 0 to 10, whatever it is you're facing, you might be about a 3. Maybe it's a job interview or something. You could be about a 3. That's probably normal. That's a normal reaction. But because we feel it at all and we don't like the feeling, it might as well be a 10. So it becomes magnified. And long-term anxiety, if it's not the same thing, if it's leaping from one thing to the next, I often find it's not necessarily the thing itself we worry about or that we fear. It's how it would feel. We're trying to avoid the feeling. So recognize the difference, as I say, between what is a real genuine concern, try to put it into a context, but also the worst case scenario. I suppose one way of doing that is you could ask yourself, whatever it is you're concerned about, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen? But then also ask yourself, what's the worst thing that's most likely to happen? What you often find is there's a gulf between the two, okay? So just little questions like that can help you to reframe things. Also, going back to your awareness, is to label what it is you're doing, actually acknowledge it. I'm having that thought again, or I've just been reminded of that again. I'm back in the rumination loop, whatever it is. I'm not sure how this thing's going to go next week. Here I am catastrophizing. That situation I was in last year, 5 years ago, has come into my head again, and I'm finding it uncomfortable. When you start to recognize what it is you're doing, when you start to name it, what you're doing is you're activating that part of your brain, the rational part of your brain, okay? So you're not necessarily in survival mode, but you're in that rational part of your brain. It can shift. You stop being a victim caught up in a scene. You start to become an observer of something that you're remembering or something that might happen. But even then, as I say, you could well handle it. It might not be as bad as you think. When it's going over those old situations, ruminating over the past, you're no longer in that argument or that dynamic. You're noticing. that your brain is replaying it. You're not denying it. You're not saying these things didn't happen. You're not even saying these things might not happen. These things couldn't happen, or these things won't happen. Nor you're pretending that they're not important, and you're not pretending these things don't bother you. But what you are doing is you're stopping the loop from continuing to go. You're acknowledging what it is you're doing. Recognizing as well a situation from a year ago, 5 years ago. You can't rewrite it. Now, I think a lot of time whenever we experience trauma, if we could rewrite the thing, if we could change it, if we could get one new piece of information to make it just sit that little bit easier. But often we can't. And whatever it is we went through it. It's where counseling and things like that can help us to process things in a safe way, integrate them into our experience, so that if we are going to think about it, it's a difference between voluntary and involuntary recall. We have control over it. We're not going down these rabbit trails. We're not replaying things. We're not having flashbacks and so on. And when we do have those intrusive thoughts, they become a bit more like automatic thoughts. They come into our head. We choose whether or not to engage with them. We choose whether or not to let them go and go back to doing whatever we're doing. What we're not doing, going back to the analogy of the computer with an open tab, if you think of the little pop-up ads that pop up sometimes, you go into a website and this ad comes up. Do you want to buy a speedboat or something? The last thing that you'd be interested in, unless you're into speedboats. No, you'd see it for what it is. You click X out of it or whatever. You go back to looking at the page you were looking at. You're not engaging with it. You're just closing it down, focusing on whatever it is. So really what you're doing is you're acknowledging it's there. You're acknowledging the thought is there. The memory is there. The concern is there. But you're also dismissing its power. Okay? It's not dictating what you do next. It could be something that informs you, but it's not going to dictate what you're doing next. As I say, ways of doing that is to label it, to call it out, either say it out loud, say it in your head, whatever it is. I notice I'm replaying this. Also, I'm just thinking, explain to yourself why. Again, this is a good way of getting the thinking part of our brain working. I'm replaying this again because I want some understanding of it. I'm thinking about this thing for next week because I want some kind of certainty. I feel as if I need some kind of control. I want a different outcome from the one that I'm fearing. When you start to think like that, again, maybe you are going a bit more into your problem solving mode. And it's not necessarily a case of, well, if they do this, then I'll say that. You're more thinking of, well, again, what's the odds that this worst case scenario is the thing that's going to come up? You could be asking yourself, how have I dealt with difficult things like that in the past? What if I am asked a difficult question? If I don't know the answer, am I just going to fluff it? Or am I just going to make something up in my head? Or am I going to say, I don't have the answer to that. I'll have to look into it for you. Am I going to be a bit more autonomous, shall we say, a bit more in the moment? But whenever you're naming it for what it is, because maybe you do want some sense of certainty or you want some kind of understanding of the situation, you would have preferred a different outcome or you want a different outcome, what you're doing is you're acknowledging the underlying need, which often fuels the fear, fuels the anxiety, fuels the rumination. Again, it's unfinished business. I want something to finish this. I want some kind of closure. You're acknowledging that need that's fueling it. And little things that can help bring you back into the moment could be mindfulness. People practice mindfulness exercises. There's lots of stuff on YouTube. Guided meditations. There's podcasts. There's things you can download. There's apps you can get for your phone. I always say you find what works for you. If you're not really into meditations or whatever, say you just find what works for you. Just even little exercises, things like grounding exercises, breathing exercises, using your senses to get back into the moment. You've got 5 senses, touch, taste, sound, smell, things like that, hearing. use your senses to try and get back into the moment. Okay, journaling can be very useful as well. I've talked about journaling before. In fact, a lot of this stuff I have talked about on previous live streams. You want to go back and look at them. There's some good exercises. Well, I think they're good anyway. I hope you find them useful. I go a bit more in depth in some of the things that can help bring you into the moment. But these are things you can practice every time you notice it. I often think that what we're doing is we're opening up new neural pathways, if you will. We're forming a new habit. We're trying to break a bad habit by forming a new one. And we do it when we notice it. And what you'll find is after a while, it tends to lose its power. Now, you might still feel anxious. This is the thing. The anxiety doesn't necessarily go away, but what you'll find is it starts to dilute. And the anxiety is only really there to inform you that you don't know how this meeting's going to go next week. You might find that if you're replaying something from the past, it's not so much anxiety, but you might be feeling anger. So you'll be maybe looking at why the anger is there. It is frustration, maybe over not being heard. It could be feeling you were treated unfairly. It could be you were being misunderstood, maybe misrepresented, things like that. You get a sense of what it is you were really feeling. So you're learning to regulate your emotions. Just thinking, as I said, maybe just popped into my head some things to maybe avoid if you're trying to form a new habit. Some of the things to try to avoid would be this belief that this is going to solve everything. This belief even that you must solve everything. You must resolve that situation. You must fix that argument. You must get the last word. You must whatever it is. That's the only way you're going to possibly be able to stop thinking about it. That's actually something of a trap that can actually just take that feedback loop into another direction. Okay, so that's something to avoid, this belief that you must have some kind of resolution that suits you, that's going to solve everything. Okay. Sometimes the best solution is to not dwell. Going back to what I was saying earlier, you acknowledge it, but then you go back to do what you were doing. Okay. If it's something you find difficult from moving on from, because again, could be a lot of pain, a lot of emotional entanglement, try to focus on moving forward. When we start to move forward, when we start doing things in our own best interest, we start to do things for our own benefit. If you pay attention, don't force anything, but if you pay attention, what you'll notice is the moving on tends to catch up with the moving forward. Okay. Another thing to try to avoid is when something does pop into your head, if it is very uncomfortable, if it is very painful, it's bringing up a lot of distress in you. I think a lot of the time our natural reaction is to try and push it away, try to get rid of it, try to avoid it somehow. Now, this is the thing. I think it's human nature. Whenever we feel something distressing or uncomfortable, we tend to try to push it away, get rid of it. It's just that sometimes the very things we do can be the very things that keep it going. It could be the very things that make it worse. Again, with things like anxiety and anxiety conditions, disorders, things like that. It's the feeling that we fear, and the more we try to get rid of things that remind us, the more we try to push things out of the way, the worse it gets. Trying to think how best. Yeah, it's like if you imagine someone was to say to you, "You're trying to this uncomfortable thought, you don't like it, it's bringing up distress. So the more you try to get rid of it, it keeps coming back, and it's becoming more distressing." If you were to imagine, it's like someone says to you, "Don't think about lemons. Get lemons out of your head completely. Do you know how yellow they are? No, it's nice, vibrant yellow. Well, stop thinking about them because you're not supposed to be. Do you ever taste lemon? You know that bitter taste you get? Well, stop thinking about what they taste like. You're not meant to." The more we try not to think about it, what's in your head, it keeps coming back. So if nothing else tonight, if you think of the lemons, okay, when we're trying to get rid of those uncomfortable thoughts, it's like someone telling you, stop thinking about lemons. Sometimes it is just about acknowledging it is a lemon and then go back to doing what you're doing. If it's about the overanalyzing and you're trying to push the thought into some kind of submission, okay, um, you can't acknowledge it. I guess it's like some kind of background noise. Even then, it could be an uncomfortable background noise. But again, notice it for what it is. There's that loop again. There's that memory again. There's that fear again. But then just let it, in its own time, fade into the background, because this is about thoughts. Thoughts come and go. Okay? As I said, most of them are automatic. They pop into your head, but they go as quickly as they came. You don't necessarily have to engage with it. I suppose I'll add a caveat to that. The only person who can decide whether it's worth engaging with is you. Okay? Because that doesn't mean things come into your head. It doesn't mean they're not important. It doesn't mean they don't need our immediate attention. Other things, we don't have to engage with them. We can even choose to think about them at a later date. I'll think about it when I finish doing this, or I'll think about it when I finish work, or I'll think about, and then by the time comes, you'll probably find it doesn't have the energy it had. And even if you do choose to think about it, you're probably bored with it within a few seconds. You can also, I said earlier on about how having a vivid imagination can be a good thing, but sometimes it can play against us. That's when we go down a lot of worst case scenarios. Sometimes those scenarios are, really, really bad, catastrophic, terrible. Life's never going to be the same again. The whole world is going to hate me. Well, maybe use your imagination constructively. Again, if you choose to think about it, use your imagination constructively. What would happen if the very thing that you were worried about did happen, but you were able to handle it? You were able to handle it like a Marvel superhero or like 007 or something, You could do it with confidence. I'll leave you with this thought as well before I start taking questions. Each and every time you're reminding yourself, that pops into your head, useful term is right now. Right now I happen to be thinking about this. Right now this popped into my head. But then you go back to your, even bring up right now I happen to feel, whatever it is. I feel embarrassed. I feel angry. I feel helpless. I feel whatever. I feel resentful. I feel whatever it is. I feel frightened. The key term each and every time is right now, because these things are of the moment. A good way to get yourself back into the moment is to go back to doing what you were doing. If you were washing the dishes, go back to washing the dishes. If you were listening to music, go back to listening to the music. If you were reading a book, go back to reading the book. If you're watching television, if you're chatting with a friend, if you're going for a coffee, just go back to doing whatever it is you were doing. Remembering each and every time it's right now. Right now I am in that moment for that moment. Okay. Now, hope that was interesting. I hope you got something from that. Looking at why we replay arguments, why we ruminate. Often it just comes down to unfinished business. We're looking for some kind of resolution to something that is deeply, deeply unpleasant. It might have been embarrassing for us. It might have been shameful for us. It might have been really just bloody unfair. It could have been any number of things. What we're looking for is some kind of resolution. If it's something that we fear could happen, what we want is some kind of control over it. What we want is some kind of certainty. What we want is some kind of escape route. Okay. We want something to say that's going to get us out of whatever it is. And what we're doing whenever we're overanalyzing, we actually think we're helping ourselves. A lot of the time we're just creating a loop, because the more distressed we get, that feeds the loop again to try to get us out of that. So I'll end with one thing. Counseling is a good place to go. Having a good counselor to talk to help you to find ways to understand your fears, to understand what's going on with you, understand yourself a bit better and how you interact with the world. Also, to help you to recognize your own efficacy, your own resilience, your own confidence. I always remember a case study from years ago when I was a student counselor. It was a case study that we were given to look at. And it was a guy who struggled with anxiety. He struggled with social anxiety, judged himself very harshly, was always assuming the worst. And in the case study, it said it gave examples of how he panicked over things. But then it also said on Saturday nights he played lead guitar in a rock band. And you're thinking, well, hold on a minute. You can get up on stage and you can play to people. You can play music. I'm going to hazard a guess. That takes a good level of self-confidence, a belief in yourself to be able to play, regardless of what you think the crowd might be thinking. You need to have a level of competency and confidence to be able to play the guitar. So what's going on in that situation that's having that you're struggling somewhere else? What are you doing here when you're playing guitar? What's happening there that you could take, that you could utilize, that you could adapt, that would compensate for those situations? That's what I mean. Sometimes there's a disconnect. We don't give ourselves enough credit. Even the horrendous, terrible things that we've been through, we're often thinking of how badly, deeply these things have wounded us, hurt us, changed us for the worst, things like that. What we don't pay attention to are the other little things. Actually, it's just come into my head. Let me know in the comments, and I will get to them. I did a video about maybe a couple of years ago about post-traumatic growth. Would anybody be interested in looking at post-traumatic growth? That's something we often forget. We often think in terms of a disorder and how badly things affect us. And I'm not saying they don't. I'm not saying we should ignore those things. But you look at some of the ways that we grow. We become better. We become stronger. We become more galvanized and things like that. Let me know in the comment section if you do. Next time I will do a full live stream on post-traumatic growth. It is a very interesting subject. It's something that's often overlooked. Okay, it's something I would tend to look at in therapy as well, the different little areas where people improve a lot. So anyway, enough of my waffling. Let's get back to the beginning. Let's say hello. Hello, Carol. Hello, on my way. Hello, Ellie. Let me see. It's just laughing off a negative encounter enough to protect us from fallout, from further abuse. That's the thing about, pardon me, thing about our defense mechanisms. We have many different kinds of defense mechanisms, and some are adaptive, some are maladaptive, some are mature, some are immature, some are appropriate, some not so appropriate. Laughter, humor is largely thought of, and I would agree with this to some degree. Well, no, to a large degree, that humor is one of our most mature defense mechanisms. That ability to be able to laugh at the ridiculous side of things, to be able to lighten the mood, to ease the tension in a tense situation. It's a very mature, useful one. Now, the thing is, like all our defense mechanisms, sometimes it can be maladaptive. There's nothing more annoying, I think. Let me know what you think. You're watching a movie and it doesn't matter, this terrible thing happens, a big six-legged shark is running towards someone, whatever, and they have to blow it up with a bazooka or something. And then there's a witty quip at the end of it. I'm thinking, well, no, that's what the hell are you doing? I just find that irritating. Now, I know audiences seem to like that sort of thing, a little funny one-liner every time something awful happens. Maybe it's just me. It can be a useful thing, and other times it can be maladaptive. We could try to ease the tension in a tense situation. The joke we tell or the quip we come out with is probably the least appropriate thing we could be doing. Sometimes we could be laughing at something. It's more like we're in denial, maybe. So it really depends. But as a defense mechanism, humor is considered to be up there, one of the top ones. It's one that I would use a lot anyway. So where did we get to? Hello, Joe. Hello, Amanda. Hello, Sean Ixt, if that's how it's pronounced. That's the thing when I pronounce people's names, especially if they're usernames. I never know if I'm pronouncing them right. And I've just realised I'm actually wearing the wrong glasses. I should be wearing these because I got new glasses so I could actually see the screen. What do you mean? This is me. Is this what I really look like? Ah, that's better. There we go. Yeah, Carl, you were saying about laughing off the negativity is the easiest way to let go of the interactions. If it's your own internal stuff that's going on, again, there can be something useful in being able to recognize the ridiculous side of things. This is where sometimes journaling can help, in the sense that we could be writing down what we're worried about. I use that example, a meeting in work next week. So we're afraid the boss is going to say this, the manager's going to do that, they're going to find out about this, they're going to blame me for whatever it is. I always say when it's in your head, it's always so much bigger. Again, we go down so many rabbit trails. So we write down whatever it is we fear is going to happen, with terrible things, terrible consequences. We write it down. But if you were to go back and read that a couple of hours later, a day later, whatever, you read that back to yourself and you see it's lost its power. It doesn't have the power it once had. It's so much smaller. And sometimes we can have a laugh at that. It was so much bigger whenever I was thinking about it over and over again. Or we could be writing down about whatever it was we were afraid of, and it didn't happen. Or maybe it did happen, but it certainly wasn't the nuclear explosion we expected. It was more like a limp indoor firework. Again, to be able to look at that with a sense of humor, okay, can be quite helpful. Even when we go back on some of those old interactions, the things that we found hurtful, to replay that, it is going to bring up pain. But if you were to take the focus off the pain and just shift it slightly to the other person's behavior, what you probably found was a fully grown adult acting like a 3-year-old who's just been told no. It starts to look different. When you start to hear when you think back of some of the excuses you heard. Okay, I'm going to share a couple of excuses with you. At the time, this was really bloody annoying. When I look at it now, and even when I tell this story, people laugh. When I was a lot younger, long before I was a therapist, I worked in this place and we used to do exhibitions and things. So we would put up stands and graphics and stuff on these exhibitions for different things. And we went out to do an exhibition one time, and the guy that was there said, you did a great job, really appreciate that. There's a load of free tickets. Now, I'm a young guy, I had dark hair, didn't need glasses. What the hell did I want to go to one of these exhibitions for? But I said thanks anyway. And I took them back to the office and I just put them down on the desk and said, there you go, folks. Free tickets for that exhibition. Anybody, just help yourselves. Now, about 20 minutes later, one of the girls in the office came out and she said, where are the tickets? I said, they're on the desk over there. She says, there's only one left. How many were there? I said, there was about a dozen. And she says, oh. And she starts asking around, did anybody get tickets? Does anyone? Nobody got tickets. They were all saying, no. I didn't get one. I was going to take one. I was going to take two. Yeah, I was going. One guy sitting in the corner, this guy I worked with, I'm not going to give his name in case he's watching. Don't embarrass him. This one guy sitting in the corner, he said, did you get any tickets? And he never answered. He just sheepishly worked away at his computer. He says, did you take any tickets? He says, that was Darren's fault. And everybody in the office stopped and just went, what? What are you talking about? He says, that was Darren's fault. Everyone's looking at each other, looking at me, and we're all shrugging. What was Darren's fault? He says, Darren came in here and he said, there's tickets, just help yourselves. That's what I did. So he'd lifted all the bloody tickets and he blamed me for his greed. Now, at the time, that was really annoying. But when I look back at it now, even when I tell that story, it always gets a laugh. It is so petty. It is so pathetic. It is so... words don't... the words just don't come to me. When we look back at some of those interactions, they might have been very, very hurtful. They might have been very painful. They might have been very embarrassing. There could have been any number of things. But when you start to pay attention and actually think of how bloody ridiculous a lot of it was, someone could blame you because it rained yesterday. Someone could be blaming you because they missed the bus earlier. Whatever it is, when you get to see how ridiculous it is, the humor, seeing the ridiculous side of things can be a good way to help us put things into perspective. Where do we get to? My mind does go off in funny tangents, doesn't it? JP says, I had years of my head being possessed, not a place where I see the comedy of the abuser. Yeah, as I say, there is something in that when you see and you recognize how ridiculous some of the excuses were. Absolutely. And B Kinder says, thank you for this, Darren. Timely and helpful. That's good. Glad you found it helpful. Let me see. A couple of people are saying best to laugh out loud at the narcissist. Well, what I would often say is that's entirely up to you, first of all. But regardless of how ridiculous someone is, even if they do behave like Wile E. Coyote and everything just blows up in their face, you don't always know what someone's capable of. Okay, so always, if you feel safe. It can take me overnight now to let go of something like a negative encounter, but it's gone after I consider my options. That is a really good idea about considering your options. What would I do if this were to happen? Even what could I do if this were to happen? Take that a bit further. How likely is this to happen? Okay, ask yourself different questions like that. You're getting out of that negative loop. But the more negative we get, the more that feeds the loop. The more we go down those rabbit holes, the more we find different things that could possibly happen. Yeah, but what if this? But what if that? When you're thinking of your options, you could even ask that question the other way around. What if this goes wrong? Well, what if it doesn't? What if it works out in your favor? What if you're more than able to handle it? What if whatever it is you're worried about, what if you're wrong? Funny, we never ask those questions the other way around. Where do we get to? Rebs is saying, makes so much sense. 35 years trying to make him see, and he wouldn't. Why would he change after we broke up? Yeah, why would he? One of the most sobering things I ever heard in my therapy many years ago was being asked, well, what needs to change? What needs to be different? And I says, well, they need to stop this. They need to be more like this. They need to stop doing this. The counselor just asked me, why would they? I was really sober and I was kind of, what? What do you mean? It works for them. Why would they treat you decently? They're getting away with it. Why would they stop doing these things? It's getting them what they want. Why would they listen to you? They're not having to take any accountability. If they were to listen to you, they'd have to own up to things. That was an odd approach for a counsellor, but I could see her point. It was absolutely right. Absolutely right. Why would this person change? No matter what you do, no matter how you try to persuade them, no matter how you try to bribe them, no matter how you threaten them, no matter how you persuade them, no matter how much you try to love them, no matter how, they just keep doing the same thing. because in their head it works for them. They seem to believe it keeps them safe. It keeps that emotional suit of armor on them. They remain superior. They remain special. They remain unaccountable. Why would they change? It's a very sobering thought, that. Not a pleasant thought, but it is sobering. James, is silence in a way the best response to narcissistic manipulation? Because I see what is really going on. I wouldn't say it's the best response, but it can be a response, and it depends on the situation. It can be a pretty good one, in the sense that what you're actually doing is you're not engaging, you're not playing the game, you're not getting hooked into the mental gymnastics. So it can be a useful response. I think I talked about this a while ago about indifference. It doesn't really matter to you what they're doing. You've no interest in how whatever it is they're doing, whatever it is they're saying. You take no pleasure in their misery, no joy in it whatsoever. But you don't feel any bitterness or resentment to their success or happiness either. They just don't matter to you. Okay. Going to add to that as well. Silence can be useful. Doesn't mean we have to be rude. Okay. I always say that good manners and courtesy don't cost anybody anything. You don't lose that part of yourself. So you can't do that, but you don't necessarily engage with someone. You're under no obligation to engage with someone who's maybe just trying to manipulate and coerce you. Let me get to Carl says last narc went ballistic when they were ignored. Yeah, that's what I say. You always be careful who you're dealing with. Sometimes you don't know what they're capable of. Missy says, let Jesus take the wheel. He loves driving. There's a little bit of a laugh there. Well, a lot of people find a lot of comfort and a lot of confidence in their faith. So, Lax says, Darren due to be looking more intimidating with a beard. Yeah, do you know what? I don't know whether I'm going to keep this or not, because it's harder work than I thought. Yeah, don't know. Might lose it. Also, it's coming up to Christmas. People might mistake me for Santa. Sarah's asking, Sean, are you still doing YouTube videos? Sean, wherever you are, yeah, let us know if you're still doing YouTube videos. Let me know what kind of videos you make. I might give you a little watch later on. We get to... If anybody has a question, please put a little question mark because it's easier for me to find. And other than that, I'm just jumping in on people's conversations. On my way says, working through cognitive dissonance helped me with the rumination. That's a very, very good point. On my way, the cognitive dissonance, this having opposing beliefs at the same time. That's what I said earlier on about sometimes that negativity, that inner critic. We know it's in our best interest to maybe apply for a promotion, to maybe apply for a new job, to maybe make new friends and things like that. We know that rationally. We know that it's something we want, it's something we need, it's something we're going to benefit from. But then there is also this other belief that we're unlovable, we're a failure, we're useless, we're all of those terrible things, we have betrayed them, or all whatever. Those two things at the same time. Okay. The dissonance as well. Sometimes it's believing something and yet behaving in a way that's not congruent. Okay. We could know that this person is just using us, they're intimidating us, they're lying to us, and yet we're behaving in a way as if, well, I don't want to rock the boat. So yeah, that working through the dissonance, trying to untangle them both, if you will, trying to recognize what's going on with us. There are sometimes um, it is possible we can believe two things at the same time, and both can be true. They're just true in different situations. Um, it's not always a dichotomy. But if you were in a relationship or an environment with someone who, quite often what you would have found is that when they were manipulating you, they were leading you to believe it was a dichotomy. It's either good or bad, it's right or wrong, it's yes or it's no. You either take a blue one or a red one, a black one or a white one, a green one or a brown one, whatever, whatever it is. They give you your choices when in reality you could have chosen anything. Okay, there was a lot more to it. It's not always a dichotomy. It's not always this or it's that. um Sorry, wandered off there. Where'd I get to? Flying free. I'm not sure what's going on. Let me see. It's just jumped. James says, I'm done with closure. There's no such thing. Move on. James, I would suggest, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I would invite you to think about closure isn't always what we think it is. It doesn't always look the way we think it should look. Sometimes the closure is just letting someone go, just acknowledging they are what they are, or whatever happened, happened. Um, it's not always what we think it is. It's not always getting the last word. It's not always getting the sense of justice or whatever that we think we deserve. It can be a lot of different things. I can't give you a definitive answer of what closure looks like because it looks different for different people. I think when we recognize that maybe a sense of closure isn't dependent on someone else, especially someone who's never going to give it to you, they're never going to apologize, they're never going to acknowledge, the sense of closure is not dependent on them. And the moving forward, as I say, the moving forward, the more we do that in little different ways, the moving on tends to catch up. So Sunrise Jesus says, I love the R2D2 behind you. Yeah, thank you. That was actually, oddly enough, there was bubble bath in that at one point. Yeah, back in the day. Yeah, but it is a nice little model. So where did we get to? Solo Traveler. Patrick Teenan's video on inner child and lack of soothing emotional needs of inner child may be resurfacing. I don't think I've seen that video, but I might have a look for it. Lack of soothing, lack of nurturing. Sometimes this is a thing, sometimes it's not necessarily that the person was abusive in the sense that they went out of their way to hurt us. They could have been neglectful, which is more like a sin of omission rather than a sin of commission. They didn't recognize your needs. They didn't empathize with you when it came to your feelings, your experiences, things like that. They ignored your needs, not deliberately to hurt you. They just weren't even on their radar. They weren't that big a deal to them. They just lacked empathy. There could be a lot of different things going on there. And sometimes what you find with that inner child work and the emotional needs, sometimes it comes through neglect. There can be abuse as well, but sometimes it comes through neglect. And even in long-term narcissistic relationships, as much as they can be very abusive, there are some that are just very neglectful. You're fine until you have a need, and then they shut down. They don't want to meet your need. And it's not necessarily that they're setting out to hurt you, but the fact that you're hurt or you get hurt, they take no responsibility for that. It's I think I did a video, if anybody's interested. It might be about a year or two old by now. I looked at the impact of narcissistic neglect as opposed to abuse. I looked at the neglect, what the neglect. I'm thinking, if I'm right, I did two videos. It was too long, so I broke it into two. I did one on what the neglect looks like, how it can manifest, but then I did one on the impact of it. If anyone's interested, have a look. Let's see me going into it all now. Karen says, interesting thing about two GMs. Yeah, the closure is found when you move on. That's what I've learned. Always looking for closure. They don't care. These type of people will torture with that too. That's a very good point. There are some people, the fact that you are looking for closure, you're still feeding them. You're still giving them some kind of attention. The fact that if you were to see them and you were to try to have that conversation where you finally think you're going to get the last word, all you're really doing is feeding them, because in their head, you're still thinking about them. You're still thinking about that. That gives them the energy. Remember that emotional vampire? It's like the fangs just go right into you. They're still being fed. So that's a really good point. Thank you for that. Where do we get to? HP84, I needed this. Thanks, Don. You're welcome. Glad you found it helpful. Once I started laughing, everything, it just jumped. I have to go back to that. Jane says she likes it. There's both Star Wars and Star Trek. Yeah, I also have Doctor Who. I've got a little police box. I also have the Galactica from Battlestar Galactica. I also have an Eagle transporter from Space 1999. Oh, my mind goes all over the place. Tell you what I am looking for, and I've never found one yet. I'm looking for a model of the Liberator from Blake 7. So if anybody can find one, not looking for a modern one. I'm looking for, they used to do a little die cast one. Can't find one anywhere. If anybody knows where I might find one, put it in the comments. I might have a look. The little Liberator. I don't know if they ever did a model. I don't know if they ever did a toy, but I would like the Scorpio as well from the season 4 or season D, I think the diehards call it. Yeah. So anyway, that's me waffling. I should be answering your questions. Where do you get to? Roar, if I pronounced that right. Come from an intergenerational narc family. Grandma kept popping the baby's out, but hardly any parenting. Sad to see the damage of neglect, and it can impact for many generations. Yeah, there's something in that. Sometimes what we forget is, I'm not saying this to excuse anything, by the way, but maybe put something into a context. Sometimes what we forget is our parents had parents, and they had parents, and they had parents. Yeah, there's a lot of different stuff going on. Missy, I'm still on the R2D2 bubble bath. Bubble bath's long since gone. I think someone bought me that. I think it would have been the 90s. It was when the, what do you call it, the Star Wars movie? What do you call the prequel one? The Phantom Menace. It was when the Phantom Menace came out. Someone bought me that. Is it just me, by the way, or does the Phantom Menace sound more like an episode of Scooby-Doo rather than Star Wars? It really does. I just think of Scooby-Doo when I think of that. Anyway, where do we get to? Dimitri the Monk says, it's like I'm stuck in one day, don't know what to do, even keep learning at this point, totally lost. First thing I would say is get yourself some help and support. Get yourself a therapist, get yourself a support group, whatever it is. What it is keeping you stuck. It can be a variety of things. I can't go into detail. I can't talk about these things because I don't know your situation. I did do a live stream if you want to go back. it's maybe a couple of years old by now, but I talked about getting unstuck, the things that do keep us stuck, and ways to become unstuck. But what I would say is you get yourself as much help and support as you can get. Therapy is a good place to start. There's different support groups, there's different things like that. Check out what's in your area, wherever you live. There might be face-to-face stuff. You don't have to worry about online. Online's good, but I always say face-to-face is better. Think of the people who might be in your life at the minute. They might not be best friends, but they treat you decently. It's really where our focus is. You might be stuck as in things keep coming up. If you pay attention to the other little ways in which you have improved, you have moved forward, sometimes that can help with the becoming unstuck. And when things pop into your head, it's not that they don't come into your head. As I said earlier, most thoughts are automatic, but it's recognizing them as automatic. It's the distressing, uncomfortable ones that we call intrusive. And as I mentioned earlier, there are different ways to recognize. Somebody once said to me, and I thought this was a really interesting way of putting it. You think of a thought, they're like birds. They just fly over your head. You cannot stop them. They're going to do it all day long. You don't necessarily have to let them build a nest in your hair. Okay? That's often what thoughts are. We stop, we go back to doing what we're doing. We might choose to think about it later on when we're finished doing what we're doing, when we have completed whatever it is we're doing. When we choose to think about something, we have a bit more power over it. And even then, it's not necessarily what we're thinking about. It could be how we're thinking about it. We'll always think about it, again, that negative feedback loop. We go through it round and round, and the more distressed we become, the lower our mood, the more negative we become, the more that feeds the loop. Asking ourselves different questions can break it, can help break the loop. Rather than why or what, we could be asking how, when, where. We could also be asking what's different back then from now. What we're doing is we're looking at ways to update our memory. We might be a bit older, a bit wiser. We might be in a different environment, a different situation. There's a lot of different things we could be looking at. Can't give you a definitive answer because I'm not sure what your situation is. But there are different ways we can become unstuck. As I often say, it requires support, the right kind of support, but it also requires intent. It also requires forming new habits and new routines, building routines around things that are in your own best interest, things that you enjoy doing, things you like doing. A lot of different ways to do it, but one way or another, get yourself the help and support that you need. Okay, where did I get to? I've just jumped. Okay. I've just missed something. Dimitri, you do not know that nobody really cares because maybe you just haven't told or you haven't talked to the right person or the right people. It feels like nobody cares because maybe the environment or the situation you were in, maybe they didn't care. Maybe they didn't get it. Maybe they didn't understand. And for it to be considered trauma dumping, well, this is the thing about opinions. Everybody has one. It's just that some are ugly. When I was a kid, there was a guy that I used to watch on TV. He was one of my boyhood heroes. And he was having an argument with another member of the crew in this sci-fi show. And one of them And the other guy was arguing with him, and he said to him, "I'm entitled to my opinion." To which he replied, "Yes, but the annoying thing is you seem to think that I'm entitled to it as well." If people are going to call it trauma dumping, they're going to do that. That's what say you discern who you're telling. A therapist is not going to consider you trauma dumping. A therapist is going to want to hear what you're saying, want to learn about you, find out the best way to help you. When we are listened to, I said this recently, I can't remember who I was talking to, I was on their channel. And it's about the power of listening. A lot of the time, the healing begins whenever we're actually heard, we're actually listened to, we're not judged, we're not necessarily given advice, we're just heard. We get to tell our story. There's something very powerful in that, something very releasing in that. Okay. I would say you get yourself a good therapist, get yourself a good support group, get yourself people who just treat you decently. And discern who you're telling. I guess is what I'd say. You discern who you're telling. We don't necessarily have to tell our story to everybody. Some people do, and that's fine. That's up to them. But we don't have to. We discern who we talk to. And previously, you'd mentioned something because I'd missed it. It jumped before I got to answer it. About feeling totally lost and should you even keep living? Well, for some reason, you came on here tonight to listen to me waffle for about an hour. There might have been something in what I'd put out there in the thumbnail or the title. There might have been something there you thought was going to be helpful. Now, I really do hope that you did find something helpful. So that suggests that you do want something better. You do want something to change. And that is something to hold on to. And that's what I say a lot of the time, the intent comes into it. We don't want to stay like this forever. We don't want to stay stuck like this forever. You utilize every bit of support, help, encouragement that you can get. I will say it. I'll keep on saying it. You get yourself a therapist. Go and talk to a therapist, someone who is going to pay attention to you, someone who's going to work collaboratively with you. They're not going to tell you what to do. They're not going to tell you you were wrong. They're not going to tell you anything like that. They will work collaboratively with you in your best interest. When you feel heard, when you feel listened, a lot of the time the healing takes place in that space. So I do hope you found something useful in this. I really, really do. There's other stuff I've talked about, becoming unstuck. I've talked about silencing that inner critic, those superego injunctions. I've looked at things like motivation. I've looked at things like being able to regulate how we feel. I can't remember. There's so much there, but you will find a lot of this in the live streams. Sometimes you'll find them. I do make videos on them, but you will find them largely in the live streams. And sometimes even in the live stream, someone asks a question and I will answer the question. You might get something there. You might have to wade through a lot of my waffling nonsense, but hopefully you'll get something from it. Hopefully you will find something there, but I do hope you get the help and support you need. That is the biggest thing. Speak to someone. Speak to a mental health therapist. Where I get to, it's just jumped again. Karen says, I was shocked when I found that people cared. I cried. That is a very honest yet a very powerful thing to say. When you find out that people care, when you find out the world is not what somebody told you it was, or some people told you it was, when you find that there are, in spite of what you see on things like social media, and in spite of what you see on the news, in spite of what you see, the way people treat each other, a lot of times there are good people in the world. There are decent people in the world. They're not always perfect. They're not always flawless. They get things wrong. They make mistakes. They screw up. They mess up, but they are good people. They walk among us. They are everywhere. And if you look at some of the comments, this is what I really like about my live streams. And I watch other people's live streams as well, and I find it there as well. But what I like about the live streams is how supportive people are to each other, how encouraging people are to each other. That gives me such hope for the human race, absolutely, especially when you see the things on the news these days. That's absolutely wonderful, the way people encourage each other, and then people check in with each other, and some people have even got to know each other over the past lot of months or whatever. And yeah, absolutely, there are decent people. Absolutely, we focus on them, not the ones that hurt us, not the ones that lied to us, not the ones that told us we would never be anything without them, not the ones that told us we were selfish. No, pay attention to the good ones, because they are there. Not always easy to find, but they are there. Where do we get to? Solo Traveler says a lot of therapy is out of people's price range. That's it. And do you know what? I would include myself in that. I work in private practice. I have to make a living, and I understand that not everyone can afford it. That there is. It depends on where you are in the world, I guess. It depends on where you are, even in your town. There are some places that are funded to offer therapy, coaching, things like that. There's different charities, there's different organizations, and sometimes it is specific for a certain thing. It might be for trauma, it might be for relationships, it might be for addiction. There could be different things. But a lot of places do that are funded. There are also some places, again, this might be UK based, I'm not sure about other places, but there are some places that they do offer things like therapy. They don't charge as such, but they really just ask for a donation, which could maybe just be enough to cover the therapist's room hire for the hour or whatever. Sometimes it means being very creative, trying to find something, trying to find somewhere. There's a lot of places as well, thanks to the 21st century. If you can get face-to-face, so much the better. But there's a lot of therapists would do something online. They would do it over Zoom or whatever. I get it. It can be outpriced sometimes. Some therapists as well. They might work on a sliding scale, and it's not a good thing or a bad thing. I don't want to judge anybody, but sometimes they will negotiate their fee. Okay, if they can see you really do need some kind of help, you can't afford the fee, they might be able to signpost you to maybe an organization that could see you. But some might be open to negotiate their fee as well. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of tenacity to ask, and sometimes they'll advertise it but yeah, don't say it's with intent, and we keep on trying, we keep on keeping on. Okay. Appreciate how I provide my is out of people's price. Appreciate you provide your expert knowledge for free. Thanks, Darren. Yeah. Why people watch me. I always say it's on my channel. I don't say it in the live streams. I don't say it enough, but I do put it on my channel. What I'm doing isn't a substitute for support from a mental health professional, but I do hope that you get something from it, something useful from it. Little things you can try yourself, little things you might find helpful. Something might help you maybe think a little bit differently if you're feeling stuck somehow. But always, as I say, it's not a substitute, but it is something that I would like to think would give you enough insight to maybe, or enough encouragement's a better word, to maybe want to try to see a therapist, to go and see a therapist and work on maybe some of the things that come up here. I am going to get this wrong. L something R something. wouldn't know how to pronounce that, so I'm guessing that's what it is. Listening to a kind, compassionate person is never a waste of time. It ain't waffling. That's a very kind thing to say. I'm going to guess that's me you're talking about, unless there's anyone else in it. That's a very kind thing to say. Though I do think a waffle, I go off topic so many times. I don't know if anyone's ever seen me live whenever I'm talking. I arrive usually, not all the time, but I have like a PowerPoint. And I have my list of notes, my little bullet points, and I put them down. I set up the PowerPoint and go off on a tangent, and never, I don't talk about what I was supposed to talk about. It happens so much. I went to this place. I was talking to the staff about looking at the hidden signs of coercive control, what to look out for in yourself, what to look out for in your colleagues and each other, and so on. The hidden manipulative signs. That's what I was supposed to be talking about. And oh my goodness, it went all over the place. But anyway, people got something out of it. They thought it was good. But I just jumped off in so many different directions. Where do we get to? Jumped. It keeps jumping. Used to be before, Darren, you had a streak of shorts that absolutely hit my specific situation a few months back. Topic tonight is right on. Well, it's again, yeah, it's why I do this. I'm hoping that somebody gets something from it. It's the important thing. Karen Yu says, I'm in therapy. My therapist recognizes assistance educating gives. Means you're invested in your own healing as well. Absolutely. Yeah. When I talk to people, sometimes I will say to them, maybe read a book. Now, I don't always maybe talk about a psychology book or a counseling book or a mental health book or a how-to book. Sometimes I will, I'll ask them to read something like Moby Dick or whatever, whatever the story is, to help understand the human condition, and maybe some of the characters that are in it, do they resonate with them? Do they recognize those different situations? Yeah, absolutely. Or sometimes I will say, read this book by such and such because it talks about the dynamics of families, or this book by such and such. Or sometimes I'll even use an analogy from a movie or whatever to illustrate something. So yeah, absolutely. And what you find is people generally do. They do get into these things. They start to look at this and they recognize what this character was going through. They start to recognize the motivation, not just why this person was behaving this way, but why this person reacted. So it's so much. And sometimes I'll get people telling me that they watched a YouTube video by this person or by that person or whatever, and they got so much of it. It's like things just clicked with them. So absolutely, it is about it's investing in your own healing. Counseling, psychotherapy, things like that is not something that's done to you. No, absolutely not. It's something you engage in with someone else. The other person there, as they work collaboratively with you. They're not the expert. You are the expert on you. And what you're doing is you're teaching that person about you. Again, it's very Rogerian way of looking at it. Help me understand you. Teach me about you. Who are you? Tell me about yourself. So yeah, invested in your own healing. I like that term. I'm going to steal that, say I came up with it. Where did you get to? Oh, I've just jumped again. Beverly, observe, don't absorb. Best turn of phrase. From Darren. I can't take credit for that. I'm not sure who it was, but I did hear someone else once say that. I thought it was a really good way of illustrating it. You observe what's happening. You don't absorb what's happening. You don't own it. You're not responsible for other people's behavior. It's going to sound a bit unkind, but that's the way my brain works sometimes. Yeah, hey, dinner and a show. Just sit there with your crisps eating away at them, watching them do whatever they're doing. Yeah, you observe, you don't absorb. It's happening in front of you, but it's not happening because of you. That's the difference. Where did you get to? Okay, I think I've come to the end. I've just scrolled down to the bottom. It's just jumped again. Couple of comments. Distance helps a lot. Yep, it's very hard to heal in an environment that is hurting you. Yeah, absolutely. We got our PhD from the School of Hard Knocks. Yeah, we did indeed, yeah. Dinner and the show. That's just the way my brain works. Earlier on, I was saying about humor being, what is it, a mature coping mechanism? Okay, yeah. Laugh at the ridiculous side of it, yeah. I'll never advocate anyone say this, but one of the funniest things ever was this friend of mine. We were teenagers at the time. This friend of mine and I were just having this chat, and the local hard guy, this guy used to walk, he was walking like he had 2 suitcases under his arms, you know, he would walk about the place like that. And he started walking towards the 2 of us. We're just 2 wee skinny teenagers, like, you know, and he's walking up and he starts to growl. And I'm starting to shake in my boots. My friend whispers in my ear, "Look, Mum, no brains." I started sniggering. I couldn't stop it. And yeah. Anyway, it didn't go down well. He chased us. But yeah, that was humor in a very tense situation. Yeah, didn't go the way we hoped, because he did chase us, like, because I burst out laughing. But anyway, that's me for this evening. I did ask earlier on, so if anybody wants, I think the idea of post-traumatic growth is a very interesting topic, and it's something that's often overlooked about how we grow. Because I'm thinking about it, even a few weeks ago, I talked about that myth that hurt people as if they don't have any responsibility. And just as I was talking earlier, it came into my head about looking at the potential for growth in spite of, or sometimes despite, the things that we've been through, about how we've grown in different ways. So sometimes ways we wouldn't even notice, we wouldn't even consider it to be growth. But I think it would be an interesting topic. So I'm gonna put out something, and I'll talk about that next Sunday night. Post-traumatic growth. So if you're about, do tune in. I hope you get something from it. And as always, everybody, look after yourselves. Take care. And until next time, thanks for watching. Now, where is the button? There we go.